Let's talk about running backs that you should start or sit in week 3 of the fantasy football season. We're going to go through all 32 teams, 16 matchups in total. You can pause the screen now, look at the time code, or you can check out the description. Now, here's a terminology for the entire video, just so you know the verbiage that I'm using and what it means. And by the way, I'm guaranteeing a reply to the first 3 comments on every video this year, so make sure you're subscribed and you turn your notifications on. Let's start off with Thursday night football. We've got the Dolphins at the Bills, an absolute banger to start the week. Shout out to Amazon Prime. 49.5 point over under, the second highest over under of the week. So Vegas does anticipate a lot of fantasy points coming from this matchup. However, it's also the largest spread of the week in favor of the Buffalo Bills, 12.5 point favorites. So it should be a great day for James Cook. Now, of course, anything is possible, but all the stars are aligning for James Cook this week. Get to play the Miami Dolphins, which are a top 6 matchup for running backs through 2 weeks. They're giving up a ton of fantasy points. You're heavy favorites. You're at home. James Cook is my RB7 this week, and even 7 feels too low for James Cook at this point. He should smash. Now, on the opposite side, this matchup is very simple. You also start Devon Achane, who, yes, while Devon Achane might not be the favorite team in this game with the Dolphins, but it doesn't matter. He's completely matchup proof. In fact, last week he had 53 out of 57 snaps for the Miami Dolphins. And here's what's great about Devon Achane. Not only is he their RB1 with 11 rushing attempts, he's also their number 1 wide receiver. That's just the way they utilize him out of the backfield. 10 targets, 8 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown. 23 of his 26 fantasy points came through the air. No other receiver got even close to that type of usage, so he is just a no-brainer, must start every single week. Let's head to the start of the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games on Sunday. The Falcons at the Panthers. Falcons are favored by 3.5 points. Bijan Robinson, of course you're going to start Bijan Robinson. There should be no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I know Tyler Algier got some work last week, but they had that game in hand, Sunday Night Football versus the Vikings. They were able to run the clock out at the end of the game, and Tyler Algier got some work. Now, if you anticipate a similar game script here versus the Carolina Panthers, you could rationalize, if you're in a desperate position to go out there and start Tyler Algier. But I would say with that risky start tag, that means 95% of you guys have a better option. That is a true Hail Mary. Bijan Robinson is the only back we're trusting there. And then on the opposite side, very simple. Chuba Hubbard, yes, he's a part of an offense that hasn't been great, but he just keeps putting up fantasy day after fantasy day. Here in the most recent week, he put up 18.7 fantasy points, and it came through the air. Back-to-back weeks where he had a lot of involvement through the air. That's great to see for a Chuba Hubbard. That gives him such a safe ceiling moving forward. So definitely someone that should be in your lineup. Even though it's a difficult matchup versus the Falcons, you just can't really find guys that have this kind of volume and aren't really battling with someone for work. Okay, let's go to the Packers at the Browns. Now, you need to know this is the second lowest over-under of the week, so keep that in mind. Only 42.5 points projected for this game. It's also the second largest spread of the week, and that's in favor of the Packers, of course. They are 8.5 point favorites at the time of recording this video. So Vegas does anticipate a huge game for the Green Bay Packers, not only for their offense, but for their defense as well. Josh Jacobs, of course, you're going to put him in there. You are going to start Josh Jacobs. You don't need me to tell you that. Duh, right? But on the opposite side of the ball, that is where things get a little bit tricky, a little bit sticky. The Packers are a terrible matchup for your fantasy running back. We saw that last week with JCM. We saw that last week with Austin Eckler. We saw that the week before with the Detroit Lion running backs, right? This is not a good matchup for your fantasy running back. So I know everybody's going to want to go out there and start Quinshon Judkins. The coach came out and said, hey, he did a great job. He did what we asked him to do. He's certainly capable of more. And, for only playing 19 snaps last week, he had 13 total touches. That is a very good sign of things to come. Quinshon Judkins looks like he's going to be a must start at some point. He comes out here and he's involved in the air as well. He had 3 targets, 10.1 total fantasy points, averaged 6.1 yards per carry. That's incredible to see that type of output. However, it's a terrible matchup. Jerome Ford is still involved. Dylan Sampson is still involved. So I am only going to put him as a spot start, meaning he's a flexible name, but this could get really messy. It could get really tricky. Even Washington last week, one of the best offenses in the NFL, it was disgusting against this defense. So I would strongly advise you to look towards another option if you have another option. And the great part about this weekly video is you'll see my rankings in every single graphic. Every single graphic that we do, every matchup we do, you'll know exactly what my rankings are. But I'm not going to mess around with Jerome Ford or Dylan Sampson in this matchup. Okay, let's go to the Texans at the Jags. Shout out to Nick Chubb. It was awesome to see him get into the end zone. But man, that one rushing touchdown really saved his bacon. This offensive line is rough. He was not efficient on the ground, and that really wasn't his fault. It's just that one play versus the Bucs. You know, the Red Sea parted and he was able to score a touchdown. I would be very cautious to chase that 1 week after the next. Woody Marks, the good news for him, he is, his role is starting to grow. We're seeing Dameon Pierce getting, rotated out of this rotation entirely, if you will. So it is a Chubb and Woody backfield. Pause. But look, you can start Nick Chubb if you're in a desperate situation, but he's not someone that I would advise to start. I don't think there's a very high floor. You're betting on a touchdown, and that's just way too unpredictable from week to week. And the Jags haven't been a great matchup for running backs either. Travis Etienne, however, is a must start. He continues to be the guy in this Jacksonville backfield. Now, here's what I will say. This is something that we need to monitor over the course of the next couple weeks. Bashul Tutin, as we projected, did get more work after the Tank Bigsby trade. He had 8 total touches on the ground, 2 targets through the air, while Travis Etienne had 17 total touches. They were both great for fantasy football. Travis Etienne still is the clear starter, so you're going to put him in your lineup. And Bashul Tutin, you can put him in there if you're in a desperate situation, you've got injuries, and you have no clear-cut RB2 or a flex, but I would suggest not playing Bashul Tutin if you have a better option. All right, let's look at the Bengals at the Vikings. Yes, of course, Joe Burrow is not with us anymore. Moment of silence. However, Chase Brown is still the dominant running back in this backfield, getting over 90% of the opportunities here. Jake Browning is competent enough to trust Chase Brown in what should be a plus matchup. The Vikings have been a top 12 matchup for running backs through the first 2 weeks. Purely based off of volume, I think the offense is still going to be okay in Cincinnati. You must start Chase Brown. Now, on the opposite side of that, this is where things get really fun if you drafted Jordan Mason, because unfortunately for our Aaron Jones owners, he did suffer a hamstring injury last week, so he is not going to play versus the Bengals, according to their head coach. So, with Jordan Mason being the clear-cut starter, expected to be the guy, I'm ranking him as a top 24 running back here in week number 3. The Bengals have given up the second most points to fantasy running backs through 2 weeks. They are very vulnerable as a rushing defense, so Jordan Mason should get a lot of yardage here in week number 3. I can't wait to play him in my lineups. Start him with a lot of confidence. Now, if for whatever reason Aaron Jones does play, we got to, demote Mason from a must start to a spot start. Still a flexible name. Both of these guys would be a flexible name in a great matchup. But again, assuming Aaron Jones is gone, Jordan Mason is a smash start. Steelers at Patriots, 44.5 point over under here in this game. It should be a really exciting game. Now, Jaylen Warren has clearly established himself as the running back to own in this Pittsburgh backfield. Caleb Johnson is an absolute nothing burger. You cannot even have him sniff your starting lineups. Back-to-back weeks where he only gets 2 snaps. Meanwhile, Jaylen Warren, the lion's share guy in this backfield, 18 total touches, including 4 total targets. And he made an incredible play catching the ball, and then getting some yak, if you will. 17.4 PPR points last week, 12.6 of that coming through the air. The good news is he's consistently getting targeted through the air, so I feel like that's something that we can rely on. Now, Kenneth Gainwell, a Hail Mary at best. Don't start him. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, unfortunately for any Travion Henderson truthers out there, just like myself, it looks like we're going to have to be more patient than we originally anticipated. In week number 3, he did take a step back, not only from a touches perspective. He only had 5 total touches. He also took a step back from total snaps, allowed, and Antonio Gibson started to get involved. It's starting to get very messy. It's unfortunate because I'd love to start him in this matchup versus the Steelers. The Steelers are getting destroyed on the ground right now. So maybe this is the week that, he bounces back now that we're all going to be cautious. But Ramondre Stevenson looks like the clear, number 1 guy in this backfield. 19 points in fantasy, last week, including 16 total touches. He had 88 receiving yards. And unfortunately for Travion Henderson, he is struggling to do the simple things right. He is, got a lot of flags. He's holding. He's not good in pass protection. He's making small little mistakes, and that is keeping him off the field. Not surprising when your head coach is named Mike Vrabel. So at this point, I think you can start Ramondre Stevenson. He's a much safer start than Travion Henderson. And Henderson goes and gets relegated to a spot, like a risky start. Like, hey, if you don't have a clear better name, you can throw him in there and hope for the best. But he's definitely not someone that you're banking on winning your matchup with. I would be very, very cautious with him this week. All right, our 7th matchup is the Rams at the Eagles. Kyren Williams is going to be a must start for us. Yes, a little bit concerning to see Blake Corum get more and more of that work in this backfield, but you're going to continue to put Kyren Williams into your lineups. You're not going to overthink this one. And then on the opposite side of the ball, we are going to start Saquon Barkley. The Rams have been the most difficult matchup for running backs through the first 2 weeks, so definitely lower expectations. It might not be a 30 bomb for Saquon, but he's still good for 15 to 20 points each and every single week. So of course, you're not going to get him out of your lineup, but maybe if you're playing any DFS contests, maybe he's not someone that you're chasing in those formats this week. Okay, let's jump to the Jets at the Bucks. 44.5 point over under. The Bucks are heavily favored by almost 7 points. Breece Hall, I am going to go ahead and tell you to put him into your lineups. It wasn't the same great week that you saw in week number 1 for Breece Hall. The entire Jets offense took a big step back. We know that Justin Fields is in concussion protocol. He's not going to play probably in this upcoming game. But the good news is Breece Hall is still the unquestioned, clear number 1 running back in this backfield. He had 12 total touches and a negative game script. The next highest was 3 by Isaiah Davis, 3 by Braylon Allen. He still had 30 snaps, by far the highest snap percentage of any running back. Unfortunately, that didn't turn into fantasy points, but you can still start him. The Bucks are giving up the 7th most points to fantasy running backs through 2 weeks, so definitely start your Breece Hall. And then on the opposite side of the ball, Bucky Irving had an incredible fantasy day on Monday Night Football. It's just so unfortunate that Rachaad White was given that last-second touchdown. Bucky did all the work to get down there, made an incredible play out of the backfield as a receiver, getting them all the way down the field. And unfortunately, they gave the ball to Rachaad White. Now, I think Rachaad White, clearly based off the usage, is not going to be someone that you can trust each and every week. But at this point, you view Rachaad White the same way you view Travion Henderson, right? He's a receiving back in the right situation, in the right game script that could have plenty of value. And clearly, they want to use him to spell Bucky Irving. So don't chase last week. But if you have a Hail Mary situation where you need a play, Rachaad White, there is worse options out there. But Bucky Irving, by the usage, is clearly still the dominant number 1 player. Now, look, news is constantly changing in the NFL. You're probably aware of that, right? We're going to have a bunch of news coming out, practice reports, trades, drops, cuts. Now, if you want to stay up with the fantasy season, then the 2025 season pass is a must-have for your fantasy football team. For $34, it's a one-time purchase. You'll have it for the entire fantasy season. It's about $2.50 for the entire season now. You get access to my season-long rankings, as well as rest of season, weekly rankings. As soon as I hit submit, you'll know my latest rankings. You get access to all the premium tools on the site, like the trade calculator, as well as some vouchers to come on the stream and ask me questions about your fantasy football team. All right, let's jump to the Colts at the Titans. Jonathan Taylor, my gosh, what an absolute monster of a man. It has been so fun to watch Jonathan Taylor play. Now, unfortunately, in the Flock League, I just played against Jonathan Taylor last week, and he handed me an L. He had a 30 bomb on Sal Vetri's team, but he's just absolutely dominant on this team. 66 out of the 71 snaps. He is the lion's share guy, 27 total opportunities, and he finished with just under 30 points. You're going to continue to put him into your lineup with the utmost confidence. Now, as far as Tony Pollard goes, I can't really label him a must start anymore because, yes, he is the dominant player from a usage perspective in this backfield. I mean, you go and look at the Tennessee Titans backfield, you're not going to see any competition, right? We'll see here, Tony Pollard, 59 out of 66 snaps, right? This is basically Jonathan Taylor type usage, 21 opportunities. No other running back got a single touch, but it just hasn't been meaning anything because there are no fantasy points to be had on this offense out of the backfield, 9.2 fantasy points. So again, you can put Tony Pollard in your flex, but expect anywhere from 7 to 12 points. It's just, they're not really targeting him heavily through the air. They're not really getting to the goal line to even give Tony Pollard opportunities. So I would lower your expectations, but you can throw him in there just based off of volume. Okay, let's talk about the Raiders at the Commanders. Now, it was not a great game for the Raiders on Monday night. They faced a very good defense. The Los Angeles Chargers are much better than people give them credit for. Ashton Jeanty is going to bounce back. I promise you guys. Do not freak out about him. You're still going to put Jeanty straight into your lineups. This is not a scenario where you freak out and you start to get really creative with your lineup. You still put Ashton Jeanty in there, even though it didn't look great. The good news is it's a high over under 47.5 points. Bad news is the Commanders are favored by 5.5 points, but that will kind of change over the course, of the week, because obviously we know that Jaden Daniels is not healthy for this game. We don't know if he's going to play or not. That is still yet to be determined, but he does have a knee sprain. We assume, based off of beat writers like Grant Paulson, that he's probably not going to play in this game. That would be my expectation. So that's probably going to be helpful for a name like Ashton Jeanty. That's probably not going to be helpful for the Commander running backs, because obviously the offense isn't going to be as good without Jaden Daniels as it would be with Jaden Daniels. But regardless of that, I do think that you can start a name like Bill Krosky-Merritt. Now, the person who only looks at the box score and didn't actually watch Thursday Night Football isn't going to understand this, but in case you guys didn't get to watch the game, the only reason Bill Krosky-Merritt was not used much last week was because there was never a situation where the Commanders could really establish the run. They were constantly down in the game. Even after Austin and Eckler went down, they were down multiple scores. They had to throw the ball, so they were using Jeremy McNichols as their satellite back. But I would fully anticipate Bill Krosky-Merritt to be named the starter this week. Even if it's Marcus Mariota, I do have confidence to start Bill Krosky. I'll probably be starting him in the Flock League myself. It's a decent matchup versus the Raiders. And I have more confidence in Krosky than the average person. I would not be afraid to put him into my lineup, whether it's Marcus Mariota or Jaden Daniels. Obviously, if Jaden Daniels is out, he becomes more of a spot start, like a flex, but still a name that you can put there as RB2, as your last flex spot. But if Jaden Daniels is in, he is officially a top 24 play for me if Daniels is healthy. Either way, I think he's worthy of seeing your lineup, and I'm excited to watch him. Let's go to the Broncos at the Chargers, a divisional game here. This is the start of the afternoon slate of games. The Chargers are favored by 2.5 points. It's a healthy over-under 45.5 points. J.K. Dobbins is the only clear must-start in this matchup for me. Now, you might disagree. Let me know in the comments below if you disagree with this take on this matchup. But the only name I can confidently tell you to start at this point in this entire matchup, J.K. Dobbins. He remains the dominant guy in this backfield from a usage perspective. 27 snaps, but more importantly, 16 total touches to just 6 for RJ Harvey. So RJ Harvey owners out there, you're going to have to continually be patient with RJ Harvey. He is not someone that you can start with any confidence at this point in your lineup. J.K. Dobbins, back-to-back weeks with a touchdown, back-to-back weeks over 15 fantasy points. You can put him into your lineups. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, things get really messy with the Omarion Hamptons and the Najee Harrises of the world. It was about as bad of a game as Omarion Hampton could possibly have, right? There's a couple issues. Now, firstly, the Chargers were a run-focused team in 2024. We expected that to continue because every team that Harbaugh has led, Greg Roman has called plays for, those have been run-heavy teams. However, unfortunately, through 2 weeks, the Chargers are much more of the air-it-out team. They are letting Justin Herbert throw the ball to the Keenan Allens, the Lad McConkeys, the Quentin Johnsons of the world. They are more than happy just to let him air the ball out. In fact, the first 12 plays on Monday Night Football, only one of them were a designed rushing attempt. So not only do you have to battle with the fact that this team is not run heavy, you also have to battle with the fact that this is a true split backfield after week 2. Najee Harris, Omarion Hampton, both getting just as much work as each other, unfortunately. Omarion Hampton fumbles the ball as well on Monday Night Football. That is going to put him a little bit in the doghouse. I'll be honest with you guys, I don't really want to start anyone in this backfield. If I had to choose a name, I would still choose Omarion Hampton. I don't believe they're going to give up on him after one bad week, but man, it does not look good right now, and I would really be looking at other options if you own Omarion Hampton. All right, the 12th matchup we're going to look at here is the Saints at the Seahawks. This is the lowest over-under of the week at 41.5 points. The Seahawks are favored by 7 points. That's the third largest spread of the week. So this is now 3 weeks in a row where the Saints are massive underdogs. But in my opinion, we'll see the same thing continue. That was in the first 2 weeks for Alvin Kamara, which is he's a safe, reliable fantasy option. Yes, he's probably not going to score 3 touchdowns in a single game, but his role in the air, his dominance on the ground, Alvin Kamara can continue to be a running back that you're putting into your lineup. My RB13 this week, And honestly, Spencer Rattler does not look half bad. So this offense could improve over the course of the year. Now, what we do need to talk about is the whole Seahawks backfield, because that thing is a little bit messy, ladies and gentlemen. Big shout out to Mike Clay of ESPN. He actually tweeted out, good news, Ken Walker had 118 yards, a touchdown on 14 touches. The bad news, he only played 36% of the snaps. And if we look at this, yes, Zach Charbonnet still led the way quite dominantly from a snap perspective. He had 15 touches. Charbonnet had 15 compared to 14 for Kenneth Walker. Now, of course, as we all know, Kenneth Walker did a lot more with those touches than Charbonnet did. Charbonnet had 1 single point. Ken Walker almost 19 points. I would love to come on the stream, the video right now and tell you, look, it's going to be Ken Walker's backfield. I just don't think that's true. I still think it's going to be a split backfield, but I am going to label Ken Walker the must start. I think he probably does more with his touches than a Zach Charbonnet does. The good news for both of these guys, it's a great matchup. The Saints are a top 8 matchup for your fantasy running back through the first 2 weeks. So both of these guys are flexible names. I just have more confidence in Ken Walker because if one of these guys is going to have a big breakaway play, that's probably going to be Ken Walker. Now, at this time last week, we also had Ken Walker as a must start and we had Charbonnet as a spot start. So this is still a trend that we're carrying on from last week to this week. But I will say this backfield is bound to be messy probably most of the season. All right, let's look at the Cowboys at the Bears. Third highest over-under of the week, and it's a very close spread. Javonte Williams, locked and loaded, absolute must-start for your fantasy lineups. He's a top 5 running back through the first 2 weeks, getting all the work in a premier offense that is beautiful, and now he faces the Bears that have given up the top 4 most points to running backs through the first 2 weeks. DeAndre Swift, he's going to be a start, like a startable name, not because he's playing well, but because nobody else is really taking any volume from him. He's still the dominant running back in this backfield. You know, I know he only had 14 touches on Sunday and Kyle Monangai had 9, but you have to keep in mind it was a total blowout. They did not play their starters for part of the fourth quarter, so Swift is clearly still their guy. All right, the 14th matchup we're going to look at here is the Cardinals at the 49ers. Now, Trey Benson is going to remain a must start. The Cardinals are favored, but I will say there are some very troubling signs for James Conner that we do need to monitor over the course of the next couple weeks. For example, this is back-to-back weeks where Trey Benson is starting to really eat into James Conner's workload. This week, 25 snaps compared to 30. James Conner leading the way. 12 touches for Conner compared to 8 for Trey Benson. So this is a very troubling trend if you own James Conner. Benson is a very talented running back in his second season. Could we see this, change of the guard here over the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks? You guys might think I'm overreacting, but I would go ahead and label James Conner someone that I would be wanting to trade right now. I'd be wanting to trade him for someone that I project to have a more season-long, dominant hold over their backfield. And that's just my opinion. For example, a JCM, but he did have 12.2 fantasy points. He did get into the end zone, back-to-back weeks where he gets into the end zone, and that is the reason he didn't bust for your fantasy team. Trey Benson is not going away. He is their third down back. He's getting a lot of opportunities through the air that James Conner used to get last season. So I am going to label James Conner a must start, but man, you've got to be careful with Conner moving forward. I would be looking to bail out if I can via trade. And Benson, again, another risky start, a Hail Mary option. You should probably not play him. Let's look at the other side of the ball. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Christian McCaffrey has been my RB1 since week 1. Same thing in week number 2. And he's going to be my RB1 again here in week 3. Of course, you don't need me to tell you to start Christian McCaffrey. Regardless of who's at quarterback, he's going to be dominant for your fantasy team. Look, whatever's happened for your fantasy football season through the first 2 weeks, I hope you're just as hyped for week 3 as I am. I just filled out my latest DFS lineup on the FastDraft Quick 6 Super Slam contest. I'm rocking with CeeDee Lamb, all right, at Chicago. They've got a rough secondary right now. Puka Nacua versus Philadelphia. We've got Javonte Williams, that dominant Cowboys running back versus the Chicago Bears this week. Roma Dunze on the opposite side. DK and Jordan Mason, who I can't wait to play here in week number 3. The Quick 6 Super Slam, it just opened this contest this week. All you have to do is choose 6 non-quarterbacks. Whichever lineup scores the most points wins. If you've never played before, download the FastDraft app. Use my promo code LAND. I'll match your deposit up to $50, and then you're going to get my week 3 rankings completely free. let's jump to Sunday Night Football. We've got the Chiefs at the Giants. Now, you want me to play good cop, bad cop here with the Kansas City Chiefs backfield? Well, let's start with bad cop, okay? The bad cop is, in back-to-back weeks, Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt are pretty much just as involved as the other, okay? So Kareem Hunt this week has 9 total touches compared to 12 for Isaiah Pacheco. 34 snaps compared to 24 for Kareem Hunt. Neither were good in fantasy football. Back-to-back weeks where neither of these guys are relevant fantasy names. 4.4 points for Kareem Hunt, under 4 for Isaiah Pacheco. Disgusting. Now, here's the good cop part of this. They're playing the New York Giants. The Giants have been the best matchup for your fantasy running back through the first 2 weeks of fantasy football. So if there's any week where Isaiah Pacheco is going to improve his value and you can maybe flex him and then maybe trade him away, hopefully on a high, this is that week. I'm trying to give you some confidence out there. The Chiefs are also favored by 5.5 points. So all signs, if there's ever a moment where you can start Isaiah Pacheco the rest of the year, if there's ever a moment where he's going to improve his value, it should be this week. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, we did see a huge change of the guard last week for the New York Giants. Obviously, if you drafted Tyrone Tracy, RIP, pour one out, because it looks like this is going to be Cam Scatterboo backfield this year. He had 35 snaps compared to 28 for Tyrone Tracy in only his second week. The same guy who was dealing with the hamstring injury that held him out part of camp. He comes out in the second week, has 14 touches to just 10 for Tyrone Tracy. And don't tell me he wasn't playing well, because it looks like this is exactly what they want. A guy who can catch the ball, get the dirty yards through the middle of the field, a goal line back. I can't find a single reason to tell you to start Tyrone Tracy, but you can spot start Cam Scatterboo. I imagine the Giants should be down and he should have plenty of PPR upside. Okay, last game of the week, Monday Night Football. We got the Lions at the Rams. Here's the good news. This is the highest over-under of the week. Ravens are favored by 5.5 points. Derrick Henry, bad news is he did not play well last week. Averaged about 2 yards per carry against the Browns, but he should bounce back in a high over-under. There should be plenty of scoring opportunities for him. He's a top 10 running back for me here in week number 3. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, of course, you're going to start Jahmyr Gibbs. He is a dominant player for the Lions on the ground and as well as through the air, a team that just showed us they're a dominant offense. People might have questioned that after week number 1. They come out and score over 50 points against the Bears. They should be in another great situation here against the Ravens, who are giving up the 5th most points to running backs through the first 2 weeks. Now, Montgomery does go into the spot start category. He can be an RB2, an RB3 flex option for you this week. However, just be aware that if the Ravens are ahead in this game, and it is in Baltimore, if they are ahead in this game, then Montgomery will be the running back that probably suffers the most. He won't have that kind of PPR safe floor that a Jahmyr Gibbs does. I appreciate y'all watching the video. Do me a favor, hit that like button and show some love. Subscribe if you found any value in this content. And I will say the wide receiver video will be out here very soon on the channel as well. So make sure you're subscribed and you've turned your notifications on so you can get that as soon as it comes out. All right, nothing but love, guys. Go win in week number 3. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app, where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.